Hey, what's up everybody? It's Motley GM here. Today, I want to discuss playing tabletop RPGs on a budget. Whether you choose not to spend a lot or just can't, I'm talking to you out there. I fully admit that I have a decent tabletop RPG book collection, and I enjoy showing it off a little bit, as you can see if you've watched this channel a little. And for that, I'm very grateful. However, I do also know what it's like to not have the means to have such a collection, and realize that many don't want to collect but just want to play a game. Personally, I believe that it's your right not to spend much, and your socioeconomic status should not dictate whether or not you get to tell awesome stories in fantastic worlds, no matter what genre you want to do that in. If you are new to tabletop RPGs, or are leaving Hasbro Dungeons & Dragons, then you have come to the right place. No matter the genre, gaming on a budget is much easier to accomplish than you think, depending on your situation and choices, of course. If you are strictly digital, then you may even be able to game for free, as long as you have a PC, laptop, or Chromebook with internet access. I'll have a bunch of links in the description below. And I have been paid for nothing of what I'm saying here or anything that I promote. I'm just trying to give out some tools that I used to make gaming less expensive. Now, before I get too far ahead of myself here, let's define what is needed to play tabletop RPGs, what I mean by budget, and what I won't be covering in this video. Now, to start off with, especially in the tabletop hobby, I think it's always a good idea to have some go-to places to get resources from. Now, the two online places I primarily use and recommend are DriveThruRPG and itch.io, and they'll be linked below. You may have noticed that I often mention these sites on the channel, and other than maybe going to some game-specific sites, these are my two go-to for just about everything tabletop related that I can get through PDF. They offer many great third-party resources, solid free and inexpensive options for different types of games and genres. But I also want to take a quick moment to give a shout out to Exalted Funeral and Noble Knight Games. These are awesome places to find physical books, and even if you're looking to spend a little bit more or maybe look for something a little more rare, these guys have some of that going on there too. Again, these guys didn't pay me, they're just places I tend to find books a lot and wanted to give them a shout out. Well, all that sounds good, MGM, but what else will I need? Said the imaginary person I used to ask me a question so I can answer it. Well, that's a great question. You're going to need yourself a game system, a world or place for the player characters to play in, an adventure or situation that you can start playing. You'll also need a place to play, some dice to roll, and probably some character sheets. And if you want, maybe some tokens, maps, or props. But you'll also need a group, and if that group is online, you'll need a way to communicate with each other. So that should about cover everything you'll need. Now, when I say budget, I'm talking mostly about game systems that cost less than $40 to purchase in physical form that gives enough to play a full game with just that one book. It's not like it's less than $40, but you still have to buy 3 other books to make the game work. One book under $40 is kind of the way I'm looking at budget being defined here for a core system. As for any of the other game essentials, I'm looking to keep things as cheap as I feel can be found. And I'll look at this from digital and in-person approach, combined with that idea of keeping it inexpensive. But because of that, I can't put a real dollar amount on it, because it really does depend on what you choose and what you're trying to accomplish. But I'll try to throw some ideas out there that can help. Now, what I'm not covering on this video is diving into the world of various types of apps for phones and tablets, character generators, dice rollers, supplements, writing aids, compendiums, complex virtual tabletops or really pricey ones, or anything that might be considered extra here. There's a whole sea of options out there for any of the things that I just mentioned, and none of this really requires extensive searching to find something that you might like and will work for you. There's many good apps that are inexpensive or even free out there. However, for this video, I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible while still offering ideas for full gaming experience. So let's move on to some of that important stuff. Now, as one might assume, to play tabletop RPGs, you must first have a game. Now, there's some very good news there, especially for those new to the hobby or leaving the Hasbro Dungeons & Dragons environment, Why? Because tabletop RPG games can be very inexpensive for physical books, and there are many free options if you're okay with PDFs and don't need or want a physical book. The game you play is up to you, of course, and there are plenty to choose from out there in the independent and OSR tabletop RPG spaces. I will not try to assume any one particular genre here, but as with most tabletop lists, it'll probably be heavy towards classic fantasy since that tends to be the most abundant. Now, my go-to recommendations for classic fantasy style tabletop RPGs are Basic Fantasy role-playing game, and if you want to know more about this one, check out the video that I have on that, White Box, and Cairn. Now, I recommend these three for a few reasons, especially for those looking just to get into classic style tabletop RPGs, and for those that are leaving Dungeons and Dragons. These are some go-tos that I like to recommend, and the reasons why are because all of them have free PDFs available of the entire game. So you can get the PDF for free, 100%, and it's not just a demo or shortened version, it's the whole game. All of them have a very similar gameplay and tend to be in the OSR. All really have good third-party support, so there's lots of worlds and adventures that are available to go along with the game. And all of them have one physical book that's enough to play the entire game and costs less than $10. Now, my version of Basic Fantasy here is a little more than 10 because it's hardcover, but the paperback version is less than 10. Now, those three common games that I like to recommend aside, many popular games of all genres have free PDF versions of their game available as a demo, as I kind of alluded to earlier here. Some also sell a print copy of that demo version for much less than the full book, but that's very individual, so check to see what might be available for the game you're looking at. The secret to these freebies, though, is that although it's not always the complete game, there's usually plenty available in the free version that you could play the game without needing to buy anything right away if you ever really need anything at all. If you like it, you can always save up or just buy a full copy later on, but that's really only if you want to. Games like Shadow Dark, Dungeon Crawl Classics, Apotheosis, Cyberpunk Red, Index Card RPG, Savage Worlds Adventure Edition, Castles and Crusades, and Delta Green all have free starter PDFs, and that's just to name a few of the ones that I found almost right away just looking around at free PDFs. Take a look at DriveThruRPG and filter the free content, and you can instantly have multiple free options to choose from, no matter the genre. But on a final note about games, many games out there, especially when you're looking at minimalist and rules-light games, are just plain inexpensive. Games for under $40 in their physical form are plentiful, so keep your mind and eyes open. Games like Knave, Sharp Swords and Sinister Spells, and The Black Hack are all small game books that contain enough in them to last a lifetime of gaming, so keep that in mind. Find the genre and system that works for your GM style and the game your players want to play, and hopefully that's the same thing. And now you have a foundation for your game table. So let's move on from here. Now that you have a system to play, you need a world for your player characters to adventure in. There are three basic choices that you want to make here. You can create your own, you can use a pre-existing one, or you can combine those two ideas. I won't go too far into this as world building and all is such a big part of the hobby and such a huge topic that I myself have a list of videos just for that, and there are channels dedicated just to that specific thing. I will say, though, that the world that you are considering for your adventure could be as large as a fully functioning, fleshed out world, to whatever world and adventure module you have might imply or explicitly detail, or may just be the small dungeon or tiny town that an adventure may take place in. I will kind of stick to my typical advice here. Keep it simple and manageable for yourself and add on as you go. Whether you use pre-made or homebrewed, get the place the player characters will live in, get it in order, and move on to the next necessity, which would be an adventure in that world. So, of course, now that the world has been made at whatever level or scope that you desire, there needs to be some kind of issue, problem, or something else that the players can solve or help with. That's the adventure, and the adventure you will want to run will depend on the genre and tone of your game. Many games, even free ones and demos, come with at least one starter adventure that you can run. If you don't have that or don't want to use the one that's included, itch.io and DriveThruRPG come to the rescue once again with lots of free or inexpensive adventure modules. This is another one where you can filter out and just get free options and get plenty to choose from if that's what you're looking for. Do you want to write your own adventure? Well, then heck yeah, that's part of what the OSR movement and independent games are all about. But if you need a little bit of inspiration, there are plenty of available web-based adventure generators that can help as well. Now, these don't necessarily give you an entire adventure, but a premise or some prompts that help you get inspiration to create an adventure. My go-to sites for such generators are Chaotic Shiny and Donjon, both linked below. These are by no means the only generators out there, but both of these give you tons of different options and different types of generators on the one site, and I encourage you to explore them if you haven't done that already. Again, those are linked below. The final point I want to make here is that many of my favorite games come with role tables. These are excellent ways to create adventures and build worlds because they usually include role tables that will allow you to do that. And even small role tables can come up with hundreds of different combinations and last you a very long time. Keep those things in mind and don't skip those role tables if they are part of the game that you have. Now, a quick little bit about groups, as I don't want to delve into this too much because, again, it's a topic that could be its own video, and some people dedicate entire video lists just to this topic. But I'll admit, most of what I'm doing here is assuming that you're a GM that's going into this with a group already put together, or at least in mind. Now, if you don't have a group, and you're getting all this stuff together and hoping to get a group, I won't deny that you might have a bit of a chore ahead of you, but there are still options. My typical advice is to try to have at least one, but preferably two friends, or at least people that you already know in the group, if that's at all possible. People that you already have some kind of rapport and or relationship with are going to make new gaming groups feel a little bit more comfortable for you as a GM and start to set the group's tone. Now, as a little aside here, the type of humor and the games that you and your group play and the subjects that you might delve into during gameplay is essentially what makes up the tone to your group. So keep that in mind when you're taking on new players and see if they fit that same tone, because that'll help a lot when you're moving forward with a group. Now, if you're playing the in-person game, finding players without the use of social media or apps becomes increasingly more difficult the farther from larger cities you get. I think that's pretty obvious, right? That's not blowing anybody's mind here. But in those situations, you can still post at some gaming stores or even at local posting boards if you think there'll be enough people that can gain interest that way. Beyond that, though, you and I both know that social media pretty much reigns supreme, even in really small, out-of-the-way towns like the one I live in. So whether you're an in-person or digital gamer, you can look to social media to find gamer groups, preferably local, especially if you're looking for in-person games, that you can get either players or GMs from. Places like Reddit and Discord already have some pretty popular places for that. Once more, these require just a simple search to find places that can do that, but Reddit and Discord tend to be some pretty solid places to go. And speaking of Discord, if you're part of a Discord channel of a game that you're playing, there's almost always a looking for a group type of sub-channel that you can utilize. So look around at groups that have Discords, join those Discords, and see where there might be some looking for group options. If they don't have it on the Discord there's usually somebody there that can point to you a place that has it, which will ironically usually end up being Reddit or Discord in one way or another. So usually within those places, you'll be able to find something. So just, keep a lookout. You may have to play the patience game there a little bit, but those are the best ways to really try to find it. And that's about as deep as I'm going to go there when it comes to the actual group in this particular video. Let's get into a place to play. Because having all this stuff is great, but if you don't have a place to play, what does it all matter, right? So basically for the physical game, if you're the GM and you don't have a space where you live to host, see if one of your players can. If that's not possible, you can always look to your local game store, to your library, local school or college, or even public spaces that you can use to sit down and play with your friends. Playing outside can work as long as the weather agrees, But if you're a lot like me, and because of whatever situation you're in, digital is the way you're going to be playing, you'll need to have a virtual tabletop. Now, this is another place where there is a sea of virtual tabletops out there, and I'm not going to go into any exhaustive list. There's two basic ones that I tend to choose that are similar and work on PCs, laptops, and Chromebooks. These two are Ogres.apps and Owlbear Rodeo. Owlbear Rodeo probably being the more famous of the two. They're both easy to use and system agnostic virtual tabletops that include character sheets that are generic and plugins for specific games and dice rollers. Both are available for free and do have a paid tier if you decide to do that. But if you just have one group and you're one GM playing one game, you'll never really need to pay for anything. It comes with enough right off the bat. I personally use Owlbear because I just got onto that one early and I tend to stick with things that I know work. But I've tried Ogres and it works really well. And I think they both do a really great job at keeping a simple virtual tabletop accessible to just about everybody. So links are below for them. Again, I'm not paid by either one of these guys. I just find them to be the easiest to use and easiest to get into free virtual tabletops out there. Other than that, search around and see what works for you or what you just might like and what's affordable for you and take it from there. Now, sticking with the online game idea, communication is always going to be something you need, and I think from my standpoint is kind of simple. And just to go straight to the point, most people, including myself, use Discord to communicate. And I recommend that you just do that too. Unless you already have a different form of communication that works better for you or your group, Discord is just a simple and free app that gives you voice, text, and video options, and even has a dice roller available. You might as well stick with what just works here. But hey, if you have any other online communication suggestions that you use, let us know in the links below. I would love to hear some other ideas on this. Discord kind of reigns supreme here for a reason, and it's because it's the easiest, simplest way to do it. They kind of do it the best. Now that we got all that stuff, character sheets, maps, tokens, what about those types of things? What about stuff like that? Well, let's take a quick look at the physical game and then the virtual tabletop game. Some quick tips that I like to give for physical table games while keeping things in a budget really boils down to one really big tip and probably won't blow a whole lot of minds out there. But utilize your local dollar store or similarly inexpensive area in a department store to get inexpensive materials. You could buy cheap checkerboard or chessboard that'll be a great generic battle map grid and give you instant tokens for NPCs and monsters. You could typically find lined paper, graph paper, pencils, pens, markers, crayons, so that you can draw your own maps and NPCs and creatures if you want. Binder clips can make great stands for pictures to create inexpensive tokens, and even some cheap packing tape can be used as a cheap laminate. You can even go as far as saying that some of the cheap toys and tiny figures that you can find at a lot of dollar stores can make great tokens and also can give you props and creatures for the tabletop game in front of you. Now, that's not a ton, but you'd actually be surprised at how much you can just use some of the cheap stuff you find at dollar stores to create an entire table worth of games and never really have to buy anything more. Be creative and see what else you can find at a dollar store. And if you have a really cool dollar store or cheap item that you use for tabletop games, let me know below what you use or what you found works really good. Now, when we're talking character sheets, almost all games come with some free PDF of the character sheet, whether the publishers or the game creators themselves do that. There's almost always at least one PDF version available. You'll typically also find fill-in versions available alongside just regular PDFs. But for physical copies, most games do come with a page that is a character sheet for you to copy. So, I mean, there's always that. Some places will let you order that, but that's up to you. And there's plenty of free PDFs that fans have made online for different games that you can also take and print if you want to do that. So lots of little options out there. Take some time to look around at the game that you chose, and those things usually are pretty easy to find. Now, I'll put a little side note on terrain here. I feel that terrain is outside of this discussion because even if you're doing it as budget as possible, it still adds a rather significant cost to your gaming. And that cost can quickly grow depending on what you're doing. However, there are plenty of people on YouTube that talk about creating terrain and stuff and can show you how to do that as cheap as possible. So I will direct you to do a search on that stuff if that's what you're really into. The only real tips I can give to you if you're making terrain or other props for your game is think about what you may already have or that's already available to you freely. And don't be afraid to use your kids' toys and stuff if you think that works, because hey, as long as you don't break them, what's the problem, right? But don't be afraid to visit local toy stores and or garage sales that might have old toys or knickknacks or other things that might make good props for your table, or even just something that might help set an atmosphere that you're trying to make at your table. Look around and just be creative. That's the thing that I really want to promote here, because that really ties us to the roots of our game. The early gamers were always very creative about everything they did because they didn't have options of other people doing it for them. So there's nothing wrong with sticking to those roots, guys. So be creative with what you can find if you really want more props or terrain. But as far as this video goes, that kind of goes a little bit more outside the scope. So I'll just leave it at that. Now, when it comes to dice, I wanted to talk about them briefly on their own because these are some of the most notoriously collectible pieces of tabletop RPG tools that could be very, very expensive if you want it to be. Now, when we're talking about the virtual tabletop space, online dice rollers are about a dime a dozen, and almost every virtual tabletop have them built in already. So that's already solid for you. If you want to spend money on virtual dice, that is up to you at all. I think that would go outside of what I'm talking about in this video. But if you're looking for that full in-person experience and you really want to buy some physical dice to go with that, you don't have to spend a lot, despite what you might be showered with as far as advertisements online. The dice that you see here is a typical 7-die polyhedral tabletop set that works with most D20 games. I believe this set here cost me a total of $675. And that was at a game store that I bought this one. It wasn't online. If you go to Amazon or any other place where you can buy games and their accessories, you can usually find very inexpensive dice that you could buy and purchase. To sum it all up, you could typically find a good set of dice for less than $10, and that's even talking about getting them in physical game stores. You can find them cheaper online, of course. But I'll let you decide whether or not you allow the obsession of dice collection to take control of you, and I'll leave dice and everything at that. All right, everybody, now that you have all that you need to play, it's time to get to telling some of those incredible stories in those amazing places. I hope that you have a blast and enjoy the journey or continue to add on to a journey that's already in progress. In this video, I really wanted to address the new tabletop RPG gamers and the TTRPG players leaving the enclosed environment of Hasbro Dungeons & Dragons and let them know that this hobby doesn't have to cost a lot. There's always more you can add, and you can always choose to spend more, of course, but that's up to you. But if you want to keep spending to a minimum, but still play sweet tabletop RPG sessions, I hope I was able to give a few tips and guidance to those looking for simple answers in one place. If you're a more experienced GM or player, feel free to share your tips below and help the community out. But hey, my people, thanks for sticking through this one with me. I want to give a big shout out to Shameful Roleplay, a channel with a similar style to mine who also likes to talk tabletop RPGs. So go check him out and let him know I sent you. He is linked in the comments below. Also, to my subscribers and my players, as always, you guys are what makes this so much worthwhile, and I just love you guys for it, and I appreciate you. Thanks for listening to me. And as always, to my wife, you are still the best thing that ever happened to me and always will be. Every single one of you are awesome in different but important ways, and I really can't thank you enough. So if I sound redundant in my thank yous, that's why. Here on the channel, guys, I hope to tear down some walls and help make tabletop RPGs and the community a little more accessible. Taking away perceived financial barriers is one important way we can do that, and stands to benefit the community as a whole, especially when you play for fun first. Thanks for watching, everybody.